son, where'd you find this?
That's how you know somebody doesn't respect you. They listen to reply, not to be understood. They cut you off. They minimize what actually matters to you. They laugh at your boundaries, and then they call you sensitive when you try to hold the line. They show up late, they cancel last minute, forget the things you've told them, because in their world, your time, your energy, even your voice aren't a priority. They're just an option. You see, there are two kinds of people. Those who adjust when they realize they've actually hurt you, and those who expect you to adjust so they don't have to change. You don't need to be disrespected loudly to be disrespected deeply. Sometimes you'll see it. It's just in their tone, in their patterns, in the silence after you're known. Respect isn't what they say when they're watching. It's how they act when they think you'll tolerate it.
His own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the force of the Cold War.
And it was a way of making me feel that they were a part of it.
You see it on the screen. If the government had to change the school in the grid, they have to shut it down. We got state troopers out there. They got planes flowing. They have no strange machines.
Yo. What up? Peace and blessings to good people. Not bad. I hope all is well with everybody. Let me get this up on the big screen real quick. Shout out to my poets, writers, content creators, all that good stuff. Thursday's right around the corner. Don't strangle your boss. Don't strangle your supervisors. It's going to be okay. You're going to make it. You know what time it is. I got Sydney in the building. Grab your thinking caps. Literally, figuratively. Be comfortable, cozy, like, share, repost. Let people know that we are on. I, the DJ, will be in the background, of course, taking my own personal notes. I thank you for being here with us. And I will see you guys in a bit. I bid you adieu for now. Hold on a minute.
Hello, everyone. If you don't know me, my name is Sydney Lindquist, and I, besides being a regular contributor here, I am a writer, and even though I don't work in the industry, I consider myself to be a scientist. I have my master's degree in environmental education and a bachelor's in psychology. My love is the earth, the environment, and everything that entails, among other subjects. But today we're going to be talking about the Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica. I thought this was very, very important to talk about because it's currently in the news. This glacier is located off the northern coast of West Antarctica. So if Antarctica was the United States, it would roughly be in the location where Los Angeles, San Diego is. And this particular glacier is colloquially known, I'll just go with that, known as the Doomsday Glacier, because it is a very, very critical foundational glacier in Antarctica. This particular glacier is holding back a number of other glaciers within that region, due to the topography, geography of that region. And it kind of acts as a cork. And scientists have recently discovered, on top of all of their monitoring over time, that it's a lot more unstable than they originally thought. They have been doing studies on Thwaites for years, decades. Very, very shortly, I'll be showing you a time lapse of the satellite imagery that they've done of Thwaites to kind of monitor its progress. And then they also do ice core drills where they drill deep down through the glacier to kind of test the water underneath and test aspects of it to see how stable it is. And in recent weeks, months, scientists have found that underneath this glacier is a layer of much warmer ocean water, which is putting this glacier at risk of imminent collapse. And the timeline they have suggested is we will expect to see the breakup of this glacier by the end of this year, so within 6 months. First, I want to show you the video of the collapse of this glacier over time. I think it starts in 2000 and it runs to 2025, and it'll give you a good idea of the collapse and what that kind of means, and the standard movement of a glacier. So yeah, we will first show this video. Okay, so 2001. So that was a time lapse. I apologize, I was kind of skipping a little bit, but that shows the retreat where when glaciers basically break apart and move forward, and further break apart as they move forward. And so that was from 2001 until 2025. And it shows how rapidly that sheet is breaking apart. Currently, the estimate is it's moving about 1 foot, I believe. No, sorry, 1 mile. 1 mile per year near its grounding line, which is basically where the ice is still on the ground, making it one of the fastest moving glaciers. And it's particularly alarming because it's Antarctica. Historically, scientists believed that Antarctica was not as susceptible to climate change. But they found that this entire ice sheet is very, very unstable. They first started monitoring the glacier around the 60s, and by the 1980s, they've basically come to discover that Thwaites and the nearby Pine Island Glacier are basically the weakest points on the West Antarctic Ice Sheet. They are susceptible to changes much more significantly than other parts of Antarctica, even with limited warming. And currently we have pretty exceptional warming around the globe because of our activities and the snowball effects of those activities as well. Unfortunately, global warming causes a cascade of events that make things get worse over time as you continue to maintain that warming. So, yeah, as I said before, I don't know why my throat's bothering me today, but I apologize if I keep drinking water. This particular glacier is, as I said, called the Doomsday Glacier. It's a bit controversial. Some scientists don't like that because they think it kind of paints it in a less scientific light and kind of can affect the perception of people. But when you consider the consequences of its collapse, it's fair to say that if Thwaites were to collapse entirely, which thankfully wouldn't, it would take like decades or potentially centuries for it to completely be lost and completely melt. But if and when that happens, it would raise sea level by about 26 inches, which doesn't sound like much, but if you're living at sea level and you start to have 2 feet of sea level rise, you are going to see your beaches submerged. You're going to see anything that is 2 feet in elevation or less underwater. And for other places that are along river edges or are at close to sea level elevations, even if they're not like on the coast, they can still see increased flooding as the water table rises. Because the water doesn't exist just in the oceans, it also exists under the ground. And as you raise sea level, you also raise the groundwater level as well. And so it doesn't take as much rain to cause flooding. This is something that they're seeing in places like Louisiana and Florida, where the water table has risen enough that people are regularly having what's called sunny day flooding, where it doesn't even need to rain. It's just the water table is so high that streets and homes are being flooded. Granted, it's not feet of flooding, but a couple inches of flooding is still enough to do damage to buildings and other infrastructure. So yeah, it's pretty problematic to consider the loss of this entire glacier sheet, especially if it contributes to the loss of additional glaciers in the nearby area. It is, this glacier is about the size of Britain. And if you try to even imagine how much ice that is, it's mind-boggling to consider that we could end up destroying this ice shelf within 6 months. And as I was saying, it's not going to raise sea level rise. It's not going to raise sea level right away. It can break up, but it'll still be out in the water. You'll just have it as like giant icebergs and pieces of the ice shelf floating out there, but then it would take those a while to actually melt. But it still speeds up the timeline of the sea level rise and the kind of collapse of the coastline. Let me see, where do I want to go? Okay. Let me go over some of the ways that sea level rise happens, because if this collapses, that will be contributing in one capacity. And again, as I said, 2 feet doesn't sound like that much. However, you have to take into consideration that there are many, many different sources of sea level rise. And so when you add the Thwaites Glacier on top of the other areas where sea level rise is happening, it becomes far more apparent about why this is a problem. One of the aspects about this glacier is the fact that the leading edge is floating on top of the ocean, and the ocean temperatures are much warmer relatively to the ice. And so essentially you have the ice floating on top of a warm level of warm water. And so I don't know if I have a drawing. So if you have the ice on top, and then you have your layer of water, and then you kind of have the land, the water is going to start like lifting it off of the land, and it'll essentially be more able to break and float off into the ocean. It also, the water will eat away at the bottom of the glacier as well, causing the melting to occur farther inland, and contribute to break up even deeper into this ice sheet. They said in about a century, we can expect several centimeters of sea level rise, but in the 22nd and 23rd century, this breakdown will become increasingly rapid. And it'll essentially double the sea level rise that we've seen so far, which I think, let's see how much. Since 1901, average sea level rise has been 6 to 10 inches. So in the next couple centuries, just this glacier alone, just this ice sheet alone, will contribute to an additional 6 to 10 inches. And that's within a century. But as I said, if that completely goes over time, that'll be about 26 inches. So another amount. Yeah. So as I was saying, the glaciers compound the sea level rise contributed by this glacier is compounded by many other forms of sea level rise. Since it's floating on the ocean, and I said the ocean is getting warmer, as water increases in temperature, it also expands. And so as we see this increase in temperature globally, the oceans themselves are going to get not only warmer, but bigger, essentially. And so as that happens, it will put more of the Antarctic coastline at risk and in contact with the warmer ocean waters. Dark water, like the ocean, is a heat sink, essentially, because dark colors absorb heat way more readily than white and bright colors. So currently, or at least when we had more stable ice caps, both Arctic and Antarctic, they serve to reflect a lot of the sun's light back out to sea or back out to space. But as more ice melts, more dark water is exposed, and thus warming also increases as that is occurring. And then, as I said, it expands as well. And so then more coastline is going to be exposed to this warm water. And that goes for across the globe, not just in Antarctica or the Arctic. However, they are finding that those regions are warming faster than other parts of the globe. So we have warmer water in a location where we have a lot of frozen water. And that's just going to increase the melting rate of this ice. Where did my list go? 1 second. There you are. Okay. Another aspect is, if you notice in the video that I showed at the beginning, you'd be able to see the ebb and flow of the seasons. When there was heavier cloud cover, that was wintertime, and then the summer was when you had less of the clouds in the way. And it might have been hard to tell from the video, but during the wintertime, you did see some of that ice growing back, and then it would melt again in the summer. If you have increased temperatures, the cloud cover won't be as significant. It's kind of hard to tell, especially if you're not looking for it. But you can notice a decline in the quality of cloud cover later in the video. As you lose that cloud cover acts the same as ice, where it also reflects solar energy back out to space before it's able to reach the surface of the Earth. And so if you have a decrease in this cloud cover, particularly upper atmospheric clouds, because those tend to be much colder and hold ice and stuff like that. Ice crystals are more reflective. You'll see an increase in temperature in those areas. I've even seen this in my own hometown. When I grew up in the Silicon Valley near Los Gatos, Saratoga area, which is adjacent to San Jose. When I was younger, we used to get fogs in the morning. You'd wake up and there would be just clouds all over. Could make it hard to see. It was pretty thick fog, relative. But today, it's almost unheard of. It's really, really rare. By the time I was in high school, we really didn't have fog at all, except for maybe sometimes in the winter. But that coincided with an increase in temperatures. We saw hotter summers, not as hot or not as cold winters. We stopped seeing rain as much. We had less frequent storms. And yeah, it's kind of a feedback loop where less clouds, more warmth, less clouds. So that could potentially be a contributing factor to the speed up of the melt, because if the cloud cover decreases in the Antarctic region, there's not as much above to protect the ocean and the ice from being bombarded by the sun. Luckily, Antarctica does have deeper winters than the Arctic does. They still do have that disparity of like 6 months of darkness and 6 months of sunlight. But if I remember correctly, Antarctica is a lot more durable than the Arctic is, because the Arctic doesn't have a lot of land underneath that ice, and so it doesn't withstand those summers as easily as Antarctica does. However, as sea level rises, it'll get worse. And yeah, so as you see reduced cooling effects from the clouds, you're going to see more melting, which also increases the sea level rise. And this is happening everywhere, not just Antarctica. You'll see it in the Arctic. You'll see it in glaciers in the mountains. Less clouds melts more. Additionally, an increase in the water table is going to increase land settling, particularly in places that have frozen ground, the permafrost, places like Russia and Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Canada. These areas have, for far longer than anywhere else, been frozen in time. Like, you can actually find mammoths and saber-toothed cats, prehistoric humans. They found a woolly rhino. They found all sorts of animals frozen in the permafrost in such great condition because it's been frozen for that long. These animals, I should totally do an episode on this one. They found specimens that have their skin intact, their hair intact. They had food still in their stomachs. They had all of their soft tissues still intact. That's how well this ground has been frozen. But now, as things are starting to melt, you'll see what's called land subsidence, where ice takes up more space than liquid water because of how the molecules are arranged. And as you melt the ice that's within the ground, it allows the ground to sink. This also happens in areas where they're having more water intrusion. such as Florida, such as Louisiana, and then those will cause, in both of those areas, it can cause sinkholes where the ground just suddenly drops out from beneath the surface. You can also have just the land slumping, where it's no longer being held together by the ice, and so instead it like slides down. It can cause mudslides, it can cause landslides. This recently happened in Switzerland, where a glacier collapsed and caused a land/mudslide that completely covered a town. They had forewarning, so nobody was actually, I think maybe one person was killed. They were like a shepherd in the hills. But they were able to evacuate the town before it actually landed on the buildings, or before it slid. And so the whole town's gone. It's underneath rock and debris now, but yeah, they were at least able to give them some warning. But that is a risk that comes with increased temperatures, is you'll have the land slumping and falling apart because it's no longer frozen together. And if your land is almost perpetually frozen, like in Antarctica, this increase in temperature is going to be all the more noticeable. If you notice, the regions that are quite substantially affected are all places that are cold. Canada, the Nordic states or countries, Russia, Antarctica, the upper mountains. So that's an additional concern that will again contribute to sea level rise. As the land settles, you're of course decreasing its elevation, and thus you're more prone to flooding. You'll also see parts of the coastline or mountains falling apart, and like it's on a smaller scale, much smaller scale, but sometimes also this land might fall into the ocean as well, which would incrementally also increase sea level rise as you kind of fill in the ocean. But again, that is a very small dent, but it is still a factor. Additionally, as you melt more ice, it enables the atmosphere to take in more water. When water warms up enough, it turns to a gas, as we probably all know. And as a result, if you have more moisture in the atmosphere, you're going to have a increased capacity for precipitation, particularly in regions that are not as, or I guess it's not that they're like hotter regions, but it basically, like, for example, if you're in the desert, you're going to have longer droughts, but then the punctuations between those droughts are going to have substantially more water. And so you're going to, if you're in places that are tropical, you'll just have an increased quantity of rainfall all the time. But if you're in areas where it's more of a seasonal thing, when you do get the rain, it's going to be incredibly more impactful than it was before, because warmer atmospheric conditions are able to hold more water up into the sky. And so then when the clouds form, they're holding more water and thus dropping more rain. I think this, I don't remember if it's correct or not, but I think the raindrops can also be bigger. Let me double check that. Okay.
You go downstairs. You go downstairs.
I'll do that in a little bit.
Okay. Hey, Mom. Mommy, Dad.
Can you close the door?
Dad.
Let's see. Does not, just from preliminary looks, it looks like raindrop size is determined by turbulence in the atmosphere, how high it's able to go up into the sky. So I would say that it probably could increase the size of raindrops because heating of the Earth's surface will cause greater turbulence because as you kind of like boiling, when you heat up something, there's going to be more overturning of the material. So just from my educated guess, based on what I read here, the amount of water within the raindrops will also increase. And so that's all to say, with more water in our atmosphere, we are going to see heavier rains, worse flooding, even in areas that are not by the ocean. And with this excessive rainfall, you're also going to see more sediments washing out to sea. As the land is exposed to heavier rain, more frequent rain, or rain where you normally don't get it, the ground, the soils are not properly equipped to handle that amount of water. And so you'll end up seeing like rivers will get wider. Some mountains will be eroded faster. A lot of different aspects about the geography will be affected by the intrusion of increased precipitation or more forceful precipitation. Additionally, with this intrusion of increased rains and increased melting ice and all of that stuff, you're going to have more fresh water entering the ocean. And as you have more fresh water entering the ocean, you'll also end up seeing temperatures changing due to that, because the interactions between saltwater and freshwater contribute to the creation of currents. With fresh water, it weighs less than salt water, and so the fresh water entering an ocean water system, a saltwater system, you'll actually see what's called upwelling, or just like sinking of the different types of water together. Mixing, that's probably the best word for that. You'll see an increase, a change in the mixing of the ocean, particularly in the areas where the water is coming in. And that mixing will contribute to changes in the currents that are in the ocean. This is why we have some ocean currents collapsing. A couple episodes ago, we talked about the AMOC off the coast of the Atlantic, or the eastern United States in the Atlantic. The intrusion of fresh water disrupts these cycles. And with a disruption of currents, you can also see additional sea level rise because it changes how the water is moving through the ocean. And as a result, it can increase sea level rise in certain areas and decrease it in others. I think that is part of the problem with the AMOC on the eastern seaboard, because it helps circulate the water in a way that it lowers sea level rise for places like the Carolinas. And so with the collapse of AMOC, it might increase the sea level rise just because of that too. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of factors that increase sea level rise. The ocean temperature itself, the evaporation process, the changing currents, the changing river systems, the changing like land-based surfaces. And so when you add all of these together, along with the Antarctic ice sheet, it is quite risky to lose such a substantial portion of water, essentially, of ice, which has locked this water out of the ocean. So Thwaites by itself wouldn't have a noticeable impact to most people. However, in conjunction with all of the other factors affecting sea level rise, it's quite a substantial problem, hence that name, Doomsday Glacier. Currently, the outflow from this glacier accounts for about 4% of the sea level rise. But with its collapse, it would reach 5% and very likely accelerate even more. So we could see an increase in its contributions to sea level rise. The glacier itself, as I said, is holding back multiple other glaciers and ice shelves in that region. And so as Thwaites collapses, we're likely also going to see the movement of those other ice shelves and glaciers, which, again, feedback loop, more melting, more contributions to sea level rise. So it's a pretty, it's interesting because it's a very big problem, but it's hard to wrap your head around because very few of us have the experience to really understand just how significant this particular ice sheet is. It's hard to imagine how much ice that really is. And so I think that's related to why there isn't a lot of action towards preventing sea level rise, because all the aspects of climate change are hard to see in our day-to-day lives. Something like back in the 80s when we had the ozone layer issue, you could see it, and there was also something very tangible that you could do. But today, climate change is triggered by everyday activities that are almost impossible to replace with something else. Like, we would have to go back to everyone grows food in their own gardens, and we aren't using cars, we're using bikes and we're walking. We no longer use these mega companies to buy these products. Like, we're making our own clothes, and like there's so many different things that we have to do that defy our desire for ease. And so I think this is why, while it gets attention, it doesn't really have any solutions attached to it, because this is such a massive widespread worldwide problem that it's difficult for us to say, wow, we need to do something about this, because it's such a intangible problem. So yeah, it's interesting because being on the scientific end of things, I feel the fear because I understand what's happening. I understand what this means, but at the same time, even in understanding this, I wouldn't know what to do with this information. I'd just talk about it like I am now. So it's unfortunate that I don't exactly have solutions to offer. Usually on these episodes, I try and give advice for like how to manage disasters, how to bolster yourself financially, like different ways to help people use the information for good, to improve their lives, to improve their situation if they ever went through something like that. But it's always so difficult to give solutions when it comes to climate change, because I don't want to introduce so much fear that people become helpless, because that is a thing where you can just become so overwhelmed by the idea of a situation that you end up not acting on it at all, because you feel like there's nothing that you can do. So the most advice that I can provide in relation to this is to continue reducing our impacts. Unfortunately, with what we've done, we have kind of already locked in a substantial amount of melting and warming. There's a lag time in all of these processes. So even if today we stopped using all carbon sources and didn't really produce any sort of warming at all, it would still take years, decades for us to see a noticeable slowdown of these processes, because it does take a little bit of time for the system to kind of register the new changes and to start reducing the carbon dioxide that is dominating our atmosphere right now. But it is yet another example of why we need to. We have a dynamic planet around us, and we can't forget that everything that we do has an impact on the things around us, even if we can't see it. I can guarantee pretty much anybody watching this stream probably has never been to Antarctica ever in their life, and so they wouldn't be able to you wouldn't be able to understand what was actually happening unless you're doing like the reading research. But yeah, it's it's a very complicated problem, but again, it kind of holds the same advice as any other climate change related problem, where you have to, it sounds so, it makes us sound so helpless, especially when we all know that it's the corporations and big businesses that are really in industries that are having the largest impact. But don't forget that individuals still can make a difference. Talking about it with people, doing small things in your lives that decrease your impact on the planet, because collectively we can do a lot. It just requires all of us to work together on it. So for this particular problem, it's more important, I think, to not lose hope, not associate this with, oh, if this goes away, then we're all going to die, like given the Doomsday moniker that they've given it. Because as bad as it sounds, it's not going to cause substantial changes to our lifetimes, unless you live in already sea level rise vulnerable communities, particularly along the eastern seaboard, Florida, Louisiana, I think parts, I know like Canada is having issues. Low-lying islands, Tuvalu, one of the Pacific islands, is currently being evacuated because it's probably not going to exist in a couple decades, given the sea level rise, or at least it's not going to be habitable. So, yeah, well, again, it's not something that we should be like biting our nails afraid of all the time, but it is something that we shouldn't forget about. We need to think about the places that we've never been, because they still affect us. This is going to affect our climate. This is going to affect our oceans. This is going to affect our futures. So, yeah, talking about it with people, understanding it ourselves, doing our own research, trying to keep track of what's going on there, can serve as motivation for making changes. Demanding legislation is a huge one. Voting for the right people. Don't vote for people that are climate denialists, because they're only going to support policies that are more damaging to the earth. And keep in mind, even politicians know that climate change exists. They just are funded by certain people that don't want us to know that. So yeah, it's such a invisible problem, but we need to still care about it. So that's why I really wanted to do this episode. I don't want to fearmonger. This is not something that, like, if it goes away, we're all gonna drown. Like, that's not, it's going to take decades for us to really notice anything substantial. But again, it's still something that we need to care about. So to end this, I wanted to read a poem that I wrote on glaciers and the melting of glaciers. I also have a short little poem on, my book's not here, a short little poem on people's impact as well. So first I will read the glacier poem. Where did you go? My computer likes skipping to random pages for some reason. Where did it go? Is it? Okay. So this is called As Life Retreats.
Can you wear this?
Yes, you can wear that. Close the door, please. Apologies. As life retreats. Glacier meltwaters pour into the pot we left on the stove. Gas turned high. The not yet boiling basins roil with anticipation, in repetition, in recognition of a pattern, familiar, now historically wrong. The control, the stability, the consistency are gone. The nutrients, the water, for rivers and lakes, disrupted, corrupted, revival at stake. Heavenly ivory and cyan caps unravel like 1,000-year-old hats, falling away in chunks and wisps, slipping into the lucent soup of brine and fish, kissing life away as her shards dissolve, losing the freshness to the navy abyss. Fragile reflections of our past taste tears on icy lips, pouring out in angry wakes, raging, crumbling over what cannot be undone, rumbling aloud at sins ignored, breaking apart at her seams, for she could no longer support her own significance. The earth trembles daily, ringing like a bell. She shudders at the atrocities committed at her expense, her islands of ice, her tundras, and even her glaciers set upon mountain heights, now flood villages and valleys, even on a winter's night. Once cooling the atmospheric temper, ice is becoming yet another victim of the sun. Even as we stamp our instruments into her bones, even as we watch her die in data in our faces, on our phones, we see and we know. Yet, despite the videos, the photographs, the data, the numbers, despite the conversations, the classes, the art, the marches, despite the calls to action from the young and the old, there is stillness. There is nothing. No passion, no action. And she waits and waits as the air in her face grows thicker and faster. 700,000 years evaporating all at once. Exposed cave bears and cavemen, red flags and flashing lights. But instead, we profit off the shores of her dying brains, readying ourselves to stake a claim, to nab the prize inside. The metals and oil we desire will instead leave nothing but a cautionary tale in the future's textbook, dedicated to the ones who will die. We watch dumbly as she fades, taking her last breaths of methane, pieces of her skin shedding, spinning off into the shadowy depths. The next casualty covered up, the next lie, yet another excuse we contrive, behind which we hide. So that one was specifically about glaciers and the retreat of the ice on our ocean caps. And I finally wanted to end with a more positive one because that was quite sad. This one is a simple one. So this one is called Impact, and this is your reminder that we are not helpless. There are things that we can do that make a difference, and we shouldn't discount ourselves being a single individual person to make a difference, because all it takes is for us to inspire other people, and that is how revolutions are formed. Revolutions always start with one person. So I wrote this poem, short and sweet. Impact. Those who think an individual cannot make a difference have never shared a room with a mosquito. So with that, I hope you learned a lot about what's going on in Antarctica with the Thwaites Glacier. If you've heard anything on the news about it, I hope it answered some of your questions about what is happening, why it matters to you, what the impacts are. And I also hope that you enjoyed this content and continue watching. I love talking about scientific topics, psychology topics, but obviously my true passion is climate change, environmental damage. It is something that affects all of us. It is important for every single one of us to care about what happens on our planet, because how our planet responds to our behavior will affect our livelihoods. It'll affect the weather we get. It'll affect the climate we see. It'll affect our food systems, our water accessibility, our energy systems, everything. So I yeah, I really hope that this was a beneficial and interesting video to you guys. If you have any future topics that you're interested in, please let us know. We love to cover topics, new topics that people want to see. So, yeah, I am glad for any of you who joined, and I will see you guys. I will be back on Friday, and then I'll be back on Wednesday for another one of my science episodes. So, thank you guys. I hope you guys have a good Wednesday.
His own attitude towards the possibilities of peace, towards the Soviet Union, towards the post-Cold War.
And it was a way of making me feel that they were a part of it.
You see it on the screen. If the government had changed the school in the grid, they shut it down, and that state troopers out there, they got planes flown, they have those strange machines,